We are back with the most popular climbing exercises, and today we are going through 4x4s, which is probably the most well-known power endurance training session. As with the previous episode where we covered campusing, there comes pros and cons of this form of training. We're going to get to that at the end of the video, but first we're going to talk through how you can do it and what 4x4s are. 4x4s is pretty simple, it's described in the name. The aim here is to do 4 boulder problems back to back. This makes 1 set, and then you aim to repeat this for 4 sets in total. The principle of this session is to train power endurance. So those 4 boulder problems should be climbed back to back with no rest to minimal rest. The amount of rest you take in between is going to depend on your interpretation of this exercise, but most people will aim to drop off the boulder problem and immediately pull on to the next repetition. Because this is a power endurance session, you need to make sure you get the intensity right of these boulder problems. So after the 4th repetition, you are feeling really powered out and tired in the forearms. You then want to take a pretty decent rest before going into the next set. So again, each set is performed with really good quality. You want to empty the tank fully within the set, allow that to regenerate, and then do the same again. A key factor to effective power endurance training is first the rate of energy expenditure, and also that you are trying to fully empty the tank to get the most out of that training stimulus. So most people, when they start training 4x4s, will take a little bit of time to adjust the difficulty of the boulder problem so that you can really fine-tune and get the intensity right for you. Understanding the sets and reps is just part of it. Where it gets a bit more nuanced and where you're going to make this session effective is in the selection of the boulder problems that you're putting into your 4x4s. The first consideration is the terrain that you're performing your 4x4s on. When we're in an excellent bouldering gym like we are here at the Hangar in Sheffield, we have a big variety of boulder problems we can choose from. The most obvious difference would be comparing a boulder problem on the slab or on an overhang or even in a roof. Because the aim here is to train power endurance, we're going to be choosing physical terrain. This means I'm going to choose an angle which is either gently overhanging to really physical in the steep terrain. This does mean that the holds will change across the terrain. If I'm on more gently overhanging, I'll be working with smaller holds. If I'm on the really steep terrain, I'm going to be working with bigger holds. And this is something that needs to be considered because the smaller holds will focus more on the forearm, and on the steeper terrain on bigger holds, it's going to focus more on the upper body strength. Neither focus is necessarily better, but you might choose to direct your training in a more focused manner if you have a certain project in mind, or spread the sets across different terrains so that you keep it more balanced. While you'll be able to spread the sets across different boulder problems in different terrain, you can also spread the reps across different boulder problems. For example, I might choose to do 1 boulder problem and repeat it 4 times for a set. Or I might choose 4 separate boulder problems and go between each for that single set. So I'm climbing 4 different boulder problems to complete my 4x4 set. This brings us on to the pros and cons of the 4x4 session. And if we're covering the pros, the first one is it's easily scaled. As I just mentioned, you can choose multiple different boulder problems to put into this set. For example, if I'm training 4x4s on a training board like the kilter board behind me, I might choose to do this on 4 different boulder problems. For example, let's say I'm training and I'm doing 4 V3s in my 4x4 set. Rather than jumping up and doing 4 V4s, I might choose to make it 3 V3s and 1 V4. And then a few weeks down the line, make it 2 V3s and 2 V4s. To make this even more progression and give you some more flexibility in your training, you can also put those harder boulders at the beginning or at the end of the set, depending on where you're most tired or fresh. Obviously, doing the harder boulders at the beginning will mean you have more energy and you should get through the set with more ease. This is a nice way to keep things interesting and also see that gradual progression within your training from week to week. Because we also have this flexibility to change boulder problems, it also brings us on to our pro number 2, which is that it's really good for scheduling replica training. For example, if you are training for a route which has a bouldery start and a pumpy finish, you can schedule your 4x4s so that you do 2 hard boulders at the beginning and then 2 longer, more pumpy boulders at the end. In the same way, if the crux is right at the end, you can see how you can schedule your 4x4s to suit this kind of route as well. Pro number 3 is that you can easily vary the terrain. So if you wanted to focus on more upper body power endurance on larger holds, you can do so. If you wanted to focus on smaller holds on more vertical or gently overhanging terrain, you can also do that as well. Often in a lot of route climbing gyms where you might train power endurance, at least here in Sheffield, a lot of our walls are pretty vertical to gently overhanging. It's pretty rare to find big steep overhangs to train power endurance. However, you might have a project outside or aim to train this form of training. In a bouldering gym, we've got so much options for different angles of terrain. Pro number 4 is that you can train in a bouldering gym. So if you're pushed for time, it's a pretty convenient place to train, and it doesn't mean you'd set up training partners to give you a belay. On to the cons, and this kind of leads on from our previous point, is that because you are in a bouldering gym, it can often get quite busy, and it can feel like you're hogging the wall if you end up doing 4 reps on a boulder problem, or even worse, trying to run across the wall, taking up 4 different boulder problems. This does get a bit annoying if you are in a busy gym. The recommendation here is probably just to stick to the single boulder problem for every repetition of that first set, so that you don't have to run across the wall, getting in front of people and getting underneath people while they're climbing. Con number 2 is that we are training 4 repetitions in each set. This puts a limit on its transferability to longer endurance training or shorter power endurance training. In most situations, a boulder problem is going to be 6 to 8 moves long, and this means you're going to only spend a certain amount of time on the wall. If you wanted to train power endurance for longer routes, 4x4 starts to limit itself in its specificity. A nice way to overcome this is to break the confines of the 4 reps and start moving into something like 5x4s or 6x4s. And in this way, you can also progress your training from something that's a little bit more base phase to a more specific focus as you get closer to whatever your goal is. Con number 3 is that with 4x4s, you obviously have this point where you come off the wall and you have to get back on the wall, and this is a short break between each repetition. At this point, we are breaking out of that anaerobic zone. You end up recovering a small amount and getting back on the wall. So in this way, 4x4s might limit the effectiveness at training the anaerobic component. Our verdict then is that we give 4x4s a thumbs up. We think it's a great training session. However, as long as you're not limited by the confines of 4x4s and you're able to change the intensity, maybe add more reps and build it into a little bit more of a specific training session to your goals, it's a really effective training session and really convenient for most climbers. If you are thinking of training power endurance, make sure you also check out this video over here. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.